Few places in history have as much nostalgia, drama, rumor, myths, legends, heroes, villains, and conspiracy theories as the Wild West. From bandits, cattle rustlers, horse thieves, gunfighters, lawmen, renegade Indians, miners, and cattle barons, there is no shortage of interesting stories. But some legends and myths die much harder than others. But if you ask the average person who William H. Bonney, Henry McCarty, or Brushy Bill Roberts were, they have no idea. You mention Billy the Kid, then they think they know everything. Who was the real Billy the Kid? Why and how did he become such a national anti-hero and celebrity? What was his real name? Who really killed him, if he was killed at all? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, military veteran, historian, author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Billy the Kid was believed to have been born around November 23, 1859, possibly in New York City's East Side, but this has not yet been proven. There are many versions of his story, so we will put together the most plausible facts. One of the greatest mysteries was his real identity. His mother, Catherine McCarty, came to the United States during the potato famine in Ireland, but we do not know whether this was her married name or her maiden name. Most historians believe that his legal name was William Henry McCarty Jr. He was only 21 years of age when he was shot by Pat Garrett, or so the story goes. He had several aliases, but is best known as Billy the Kid. As a child, he went under the name of Henry McCarty, later Henry Antrim, and William H. Bonney Jr., which was the name he used in his famous trial, so we do not know his true name. Another possibility is that Billy the Kid was in fact Ollie L. Brushy Bill Roberts, who escaped, lived in both Mexico and the U.S. Southwest, rode in Wild West shows, and died in Hico, Texas in 1950. Billy the Kid's family moved to Kansas, where his father died of unknown causes, after which his mother took Billy and his brother to Colorado and remarried. The family then moved to New Mexico when Billy was about 14, and he soon delved into illegal activities. After his mother died in 1874, his life changed. He was considered to be a very honest 14-year-old when he became an orphan. He lived in a hotel doing odd jobs after the owner took him in, who was impressed with his honesty and work ethic. For unknown reasons, Billy had to leave his temporary home, and there was good evidence the hotel owner either died or sold the business. Being on his own, he was caught stealing food. Then 5 months later, he was arrested for stealing clothes and firearms. 2 days later, he escaped from jail and started life as an outlaw fugitive. He joined a few gangs, engaged in robberies, and was wanted for his first murder in New Mexico. Not in dispute was the fact that he was only 18 when he killed his first man. Billy tried to stay out of trouble, apparently, but it seems he made the wrong kinds of friends. The legend is that he killed 21 men during his short life, but research shows that 8 or 9 is probably correct. The Lincoln County War was a war over cattle and grazing land, starting the careers of several famous gunslingers such as Billy the Kid, Sheriff William J. Brady, James Dolan, John Chisholm, Jose Chavez, Lawrence Murphy, and Alexander McSween, among others. The murder of English-born John Tunstall on February 18, 1878 by Jesse Evans and others working with Sheriff Brady on orders from James Dolan started the war. Dolan, along with Lawrence Murphy, controlled the entire county and stole cattle from Tunstall and John Chisholm on a regular basis. The murder was witnessed by Fred Waite, Richard Brewer, John Middleton, Henry Newton Brown, Robert A. Weidenman, and Billy the Kid. His death hit them hard, especially Billy. because Tunstall had hired Billy and many of the young nomads to work for him, and he was highly respected and fair with them, and Billy looked upon him as a father figure. Tunstall was also well liked, and many local citizens formed a group called the Regulators to bring his murderers to justice. But with New Mexico still being a territory, the entire criminal justice system was controlled by allies of Murphy, Brady, and Dolan. Billy and the other members of the Regulators were deputized by Lincoln County Justice of the Peace, Constable Martinez, and they tried to serve the legally issued arrest warrants on the murderers. Sheriff Brady then ran interference and arrested and jailed Martinez and his deputies in violation of their legal law enforcement status. On March 9, 1878, the Regulators captured Buck Morton, Dick Lloyd, and Frank Butler, all part of the Dolan gang involved in the Tunstall murder. The Regulators had their prisoners, and they wanted to kill them, but William McCloskey, who opposed the prospect of killing the prisoners, rejected the idea. Tunstall's other two killers, Tom Hill and Jesse Evans, were shot while trying to rob a sheep drover near Tularosa, New Mexico. Hill died, and Evans was severely wounded and later arrested on an old federal warrant for stealing stock from an Indian reservation. Bradley managed to collude with Territorial Attorney General Thomas Benton Catron and Territorial Governor Samuel B. Axtell. Axtell ruled that John Wilson, the Justice of the Peace, had been illegally appointed by the Lincoln County Commissioners. Wilson had deputized the Regulators as well and issued the warrants for Tunstall's murderers. But the new ruling meant that the Regulators' legal actions were now illegal, and he dismissed the U.S. Marshal, making Brady the only law in the county. On April 1, 1878, the Regulators ambushed and killed Brady and Deputy George W. Hindman. Later, the shootout at Blazer's Mill occurred when Buckshot Roberts, one of Tunstall's killers, was found. He was killed, but he also killed Regulator leader Richard Brewer and wounded Billy and 3 other Regulators. After the death of Brewer, the Regulators elected Frank McNabb as their leader. On April 29, 1878, Sheriff Pepin's posse, including the Jesse Evans gang and the Seven Rivers Warriors, arrived to kill the Regulators and started a shootout. McNabb was killed, and a few Regulators were wounded and escaped or were captured. The following day, Seven Rivers members Tom Green, Charles Marshall, Jim Patterson, and John Galvin were killed in Lincoln, but Billy and his men apparently also shot at U.S. soldiers while shooting at Dolan and his men. Firing upon the Army changed the dynamic. On May 15th, the Regulators tracked and captured Jesse Evans' gang member Manuel Segovia, who was allegedly shot trying to escape. On July 15, 1878, the Regulators were surrounded by Dolan's collective while hiding in the Ellis General Store and McSween's house in Lincoln. The standoff lasted about 3 days until soldiers commanded by Colonel Nathan Dudley arrived and brought cannons, forcing the Regulators to escape. On July 19th, Murphy and Dolan torched the house with Susan McSween, widow of Alexander, who was killed, and another woman and 5 children. They were given safe passage out of the house while the men inside continued to fight the fire. The Lincoln County War was effectively over. Murphy died of cancer shortly after, and Dolan was indicted for the murder of Tunstall but released. He confiscated Tunstall's property eventually and died in 1898. Every member of the Regulators was now a federal fugitive, and in December 1880, Billy was charged with murder and captured by Pat Garrett. He was tried and convicted and sentenced to hang. Another fact not in dispute was that while awaiting execution, he escaped jail on April 28, 1881, apparently with outside assistance, and killed 2 deputies and remained on the run until, as the story goes, he was tracked down and ambushed by Pat Garrett, who killed him on the evening of July 14th at the ranch home of Pete Maxwell. Billy the Kid's grave is supposedly in Fort Sumner, New Mexico, where he died. The case started out confusing after the killing because the postmaster, Milner Rudolph, arrived from his home 6 miles away early the next morning to hold the investigation. Rudolph arrived to find the locals somewhat angry and in fear for their safety. Garrett, Poe, and McKinney were barricaded in a bedroom in the home of Pete Maxwell. Of interest, there had already been a previous inquest a couple of hours earlier before Rudolph was even called. Local businessman A.P. Anea, according to what they told the editor of New Mexico magazine, was that he and a friend were members of that first inquiry. Rudolph was also told the body on the bedroom floor was the man Garrett had killed, meaning Billy the Kid. Rudolph held the second coroner's inquiry and brought in 5 witnesses. He held the inquest in the bedroom with the dead body. But in Pat Garrett's own book, he claimed that Billy the Kid's body was taken to the carpenter's shop right afterward, meaning after he killed him. If that were the case, then why would the body have been brought back to the bedroom where Billy the Kid was shot? Garrett and Maxwell testified to Rudolph and the 5 witnesses as to how things occurred. When completed, Rudolph then sent the required report that was signed by the witnesses who were the coroner's jury. The second report stated that William Bonney was killed by a shot in the left breast in the region of the heart, fired from a pistol in the hand of Patrick F. Garrett, and our verdict is that the act of the said Garrett was justifiable homicide, and we are unanimous in the opinion that the gratitude of the whole community is due to the said Garrett for his act and that he deserves to be rewarded. But the story only becomes more convoluted. The coroner's report was never entered into the official San Miguel County records as required. Also, Fort Sumner Justice Alejandro Segura never made mention of this report, and why were there 2 inquests? Anea himself claimed that his verdict, signed by himself and his friend, disappeared, and that Garrett and Manuel Abreu, Pete Maxwell's son-in-law, wrote a replacement, a more flowery one, for filing. The problems arose when the signatures of the men who were not even part of the first inquest appeared on the second report, and the signatures were misspelled, which would mean that it was a forgery by Pat Garrett. But the story gets even better because E.B. Mann, writing in Guns and Gunfighters, wrote that the only 3 witnesses identified the body and that one later admitted that the corpse was not Billy the Kid because he knew him. Adding to the confusion and conspiracies was simply the way things were done back then. When an officer of the law killed a wanted criminal, the identification process was exacting. This was because there had to be clear positive proof that the peace officer had not killed the wrong person, which would have been a problem. Due to the speed of the 2 inquests and the rapid burial of the dead man, many believed that Garrett took control of the second inquest and wanted it over very quickly in order to hide the fact that Garrett had killed the wrong man. Another practice of the Old West was not done in this case, was that when a famous outlaw was killed, the law enforcement officer would have a photograph taken with the dead outlaw and the body placed on public display. This allowed the locals to see that the criminal was in fact dead and the proper person had been killed. Garrett would have definitely done all of the above, since he was known to aspire to high political office, and such a photograph would have been excellent campaign propaganda. But that only works if the man he killed really was Billy the Kid. Garrett also stated that he filed the report officially, as being a death certificate was required. But according to the New Mexico Secretary of State in 1949, Alicia Romero, there is no record in this office of any coroner's verdict in the purported death of William H. Bonney, which was the name of record for Billy the Kid. Garrett even tried to collect the $500 bounty but was denied due to the actual fact that there was no proof the kid was even dead. Basically, to this day, there is no record of the death, no record of the inquest, and no proof of a burial for Billy the Kid. Legally, he was still alive. Due to these issues, Garrett ordered a third coroner's inquest that has the same problems as the others. False signatures by men who never saw the body and if they had, did not even know Billy the Kid. What has never been explained was the reason for the hasty burial in the Fort Sumner Military Cemetery next to the graves of Tom O'Folliard and Charlie Bowdre, who were friends of Billy the Kid. It took Garrett until February 18, 1882 to get his bounty paid when he entertained the New Mexico Territorial Legislature, who were his supporters, political cronies, and he paid for their drinks and entertainment. They finally approved the bounty be paid, but in their approval decree, they erroneously had the date of the shooting as August 1881. And here's another fascinating fact. Although often accused of being Billy the Kid, William Henry Roberts, better known as Brushy Bill, finally later admitted to being Billy the Kid, which created quite a stir given the historically accepted story that Billy the Kid was shot by Sheriff Pat Garrett. Naturally, there were skeptics, but here are some interesting things about Roberts, who got the nickname Brushy Bill as a scout for a stagecoach line in the Black Hills of Idaho. Roberts matched Billy the Kid in every physical and possible way, including his voice, laughter, and eye color. Photos of Roberts and Billy the Kid were scientifically compared by the University of Texas at Austin and validated by the FBI, showing Roberts and Billy the Kid to be the same person. Also, adding credibility was that when Roberts was interviewed about his background, it was evident that he knew explicit details about the people, places, events, and little-known details of Billy the Kid, more than anyone else alive, even the historians back then. Most of what was known to historians was from Pat Garrett's own book, ghostwritten by Marshall Ashman Ash Upson, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, which became gospel on the subject. Deputies John Poe and Thomas Kit McKinney also testified afterward that Garrett killed Billy the Kid. However, in later years, both Poe and McKinney stated that Sheriff Garrett did not kill Billy the Kid, and Poe's account during his original testimony contradicted Garrett's on several important and relevant points. According to writer Frederick Nolan, Garrett's book was a farrago of nonsense that has been responsible for every single one of the myths perpetuated about Billy the Kid, and for many inaccuracies, evasions, and even untruths. Most serious historians today do not give Pat Garrett's book much credibility, as Garrett was well known to fabricating his own life and embellishing many events. However, Roberts' credibility is only increased as more is learned. Another factor supporting the cause for Roberts was the family Bible found after his death that recorded the names of his family members such as Bonnie, McCarty, and Antrim, all the aliases used by Billy the Kid. Of course, some detractors state that Roberts was not Billy the Kid because Billy the Kid was right-handed while Roberts was supposedly left-handed. Billy spoke Spanish and they claimed Roberts did not. They also claimed that William Henry Roberts was actually Oliver P. Roberts, whose documented past did not coincide with the life of the Kid. But in fact, Roberts was ambidextrous and spoke Spanish fluently, and he knew every detail one would expect if he were in fact Billy the Kid. William Henry Roberts claimed that the man who was killed by Garrett was a friend of his named Billy Barlow, who was half Mexican and looked a lot like Billy the Kid except for his dark beard and dark skin. A few months later, before the shooting in Fort Sumner, the editor of the Las Vegas Gazette, J.H. Kugler, interviewed Billy the Kid in person while he was in town waiting to be transported to Mesilla for his murder trial. Kugler's description was different than the man Garrett shot. Quoting his report, "There was nothing very mannish about him in appearance, for he looked and acted a mere boy. He is about 5 feet 8 or 9 inches tall, slightly built and lithe, weighing about 140, a frank, open countenance, looking like a schoolboy, with the traditional silky fuzz on his upper lip, clear blue eyes with a roguish snap about them, light hair and complexion." Roberts recited that actual interview, even describing Kugler, Ben Kemp provided the following in a Frontier Times magazine dated March 1980 concerning his uncle, John Graham, who knew Billy the Kid. On the morning after the shooting, Graham and a Mexican were sent to the cemetery to dig a grave for Garrett's victim. Graham stated that when the wagon carrying the casket arrived, it was accompanied by an armed guard, with strict orders to see that no one opened it to see what was inside. Of interest is the word used being what, not who. According to the story, Graham was told that the dead man was an employee of Pete Maxwell's, not Billy the Kid. The marker was shot to pieces by locals over the years, and the bodies of the more than 20 soldiers buried there were reinterred in the Santa Fe National Cemetery in 1906, but not the unmarked graves. The accepted grave sites of Billy the Kid, Tom O'Folliard, and Charlie Bowdry attract tourists from all over who believe that Billy the Kid is in fact buried there. The fact that Pat Garrett violated every rule of a law enforcement officer, protocols both state and federal, and did not follow any protocol, and had the cover-ups regarding the inquiries, never filed the paperwork and death certificate, and hastily buried the body is damning evidence. Brushy Bill Roberts matched every physical and chronological aspect of Billy the Kid, and pretty much proves that Pat Garrett lied and murdered the wrong man. But we will let you decide. Thanks for watching today's episode of Forgotten History. If you like this episode, please consider becoming a channel member or joining our Patreon page. This would help us offset the ever-increasing cost of production. As always, please like, share, and comment. And if you have any show ideas, please contact us, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.